thanks for joining us today. Jennifer S. Holland is hanging out with us, and she is a contributing writer to National Geographic magazine and author of a series of books about animals and unique friendships and the unique bonds that they create. In fact, there's a whole series of them. We've got them here. The Unlikely Friendships for Kids series. There's the leopard and the cow, the donkey, or the monkey and the dove, and the dog and the piglet. Those are for the kids, right? And then we've got the Unlikely Loves and the Unlikely Friendships books as well. So tell us a little bit about the concept behind your books.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. This is really an honor, and it's nice to be local and get to participate at your station. So really these kind of came out of my interest in animal behavior, my love of animals, which goes all the way back, and the fact that there was so many of these kinds of stories seem to be very popular. You're always seeing in your inbox, if you're an animal lover, everybody's always passing around these cute pictures, and
yes,
a lot of awe factor, I always say, in these images. And I was just really interested in what was going on behind the pictures, and you'd see maybe a little news story, but it wasn't really clear how often this happened and what kinds of animals might get together and what the context was.
Right.
So I started looking into that, and I was very fortunate to have a publisher, Workman in New York, actually contacted me and asked me if I'd be interested in doing a book with them, since they liked the writing I did about animals in the magazine. And so it just was a great marriage right there, kind of an unlikely friendship of sorts there.
Yeah.
And just the more I looked into this, the more I found that there were so many great stories about this kind of crossing species friendships, and it was just a lot of fun to talk to animal behaviorists and other biologists and things to find out kind of what's going on in these circumstances.
This is a little off topic, but I'll bet you've done a lot of great traveling.
I have. I've been really fortunate to do a lot of really interesting work for National Geographic.
I'm sure that's been really fascinating too.
Yes.
So, have you always loved animals?
I always say it since the womb. I think there's dog hair wound in my DNA, that sort of thing. My mom was a huge fan of animals, and we always had a lot of pets and just stray animals she would bring home, and so I just kind of learned early on to appreciate them, how to be gentle with them, and over the years it's just grown, really, the more I've learned about animals and animal behavior.
That's an interesting thing that you just mentioned too, that your mom kind of was interested in animals. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's something that we kind of have to learn to appreciate. Mm-hmm. How do we teach our kids to be gentle and kind and appreciative to animals?
I think it's probably hard at first. I mean, kids want to pull tails and poke and things like that. But I think if kids grow up with pets, and if the pets are part of the family and they really, have to be a part of the animal's care early on, I think that really helps them to kind of see how to treat them and how not to treat them. Right. So that was an important part of my growing up. And also just to see the way my mom loved them. Everything down to letting spiders out the door rather than smushing them. Things that you don't really, not everybody's going to want to do that, but I think just, I've grown up thinking about animals that way, and so, there are things I will smush. I will smush a cockroach, I have to admit, but I tend to think that animals deserve to be there, and, I treat them as such.
Yeah, that's sweet. That's really neat. That's true. Our kids are watching us and how we treat animals too. So what kind of animals do you have?
Right now I have, I'm a big dog fan, standard sort of pets. We have 2 dogs right now, and my husband breeds pythons. So we have, I know that's the usual response, but we have a number of snakes, and I also have geckos, so little reptiles too. So we have a lot of tanks in a couple of rooms of our house with interesting creatures in them. And that's one of those things. Snakes, that's not something that everybody's going to love, but I've had enough experience with them now to really appreciate the beauty in them as well, and that you don't really have to be afraid of them. In the wild, they're not going to want to come up to you. You just need to be aware of them and just treat them as carefully as you would anything else.
Respect their space.
Respect their space. Perfect.
And I saw in one of your books, there's a story about a friendship between a snake and a dog, right?
There's a dog, a gentleman. He's in Brazil, I think it is, if I remember correctly, and he has a number of animals that kind of coexist and get along, and he lets his boa wrap around his dog, and the two have a very interesting companionship. I think in this case the snake is well enough fed that it's not looking to for a warm mammal to eat, and so this can happen. I don't think that you would see that in the wild too often.
Yeah, but it's almost like they were snuggling together in the pictures, and I'm just, do you snuggle with your pythons too? I mean, do they have the? I know my dog loves to snuggle with us. Sure, he loves that affection. Yeah, I wonder if snakes do that.
Yeah,
too.
I would say not so much.
Not as much.
They like to be handled properly. And they like warmth, so they're going to gravitate toward the heat of your hands. So sometimes I think in that case the heat of the dog allowed the snake to be comfortable, and it's kind of like a massage for the dog to have the snake wrapped around it and slithering around. So I think that's kind of how that came about.
Yeah, I just never had a lot of experience with them, so that's probably why I haven't really come to appreciate them that much. But I think it's very interesting. So what's the inspiration behind your stories? What really inspired you to want to share these unique relationships?
Partly, I think people are looking for good news. It's kind of a hard time. I don't know when it isn't a hard time in the world, but it just seems that everything you hear about is so negative. Kids getting kidnapped, and somebody blowing up this or that, and wars, and you name it, the economy. So when you read about something that makes you just smile, and something that makes you feel hopeful about how things interact, whether it's people or animals, I think we need that, and we crave it. And also just that cuteness factor. It's something that makes us feel good. We're kind of programmed to respond to cute, like we respond to babies in a certain way. And I think we kind of can't help ourselves with cute animals too. So those photographs really get people excited and thinking in a positive way. But there's good messages in the books, which we can talk about. But I think all those things draw people to them, and that makes me feel good, so I keep writing them.
Oh, that's awesome. What's your favorite story? Do you have one that you can think of?
It kind of varies. It's people always ask me that, and I think I answer it differently every time. A couple of fun ones for me. One is there's a cat and an iguana in Unlikely Friendships in the first book. And again, because I know reptiles and I deal with reptiles, it's funny to see a mammal and a reptile together, because you don't expect to see that at all. And an iguana in particular, especially as it grows up, if it's a male, can be pretty aggressive, pretty nasty. Ooh. So in this case, the cat plays with its tail and licks it, and they share food. They really cuddle up together, and it's just such a bizarre thing to see. And the story behind it is fun, because the iguana was, unfortunately, somebody had let it go in New York just on the street because they decided they didn't want it, which is a really bad idea. And fortunately, a woman took it in and brought it home to her cat. But it was it's such a weird story on so many levels that I enjoy it. But I love the stories that happen in the wild, because we don't know how often that happens, when an animal takes care of its prey rather than eating it, or joins a group, a different species. But there's a wonderful story in Unlikely Loves about a dolphin that has a spinal deformity or injury, maybe a birth defect, and for whatever reason it's not with the dolphins anymore, and it joins up with a pod of sperm whales, and the whales treat it just like it's part of the family. And it's just that kind of thing. Again, you think, wow, how does that happen in the wild? That's really fascinating. Yeah. And it's really just kind of touching.
That is really neat. Yeah, I had looked at that story too. I had read that story, and I was like, oh, it was like, I think you had mentioned in the story that maybe the dolphin pod had kind of rejected that dolphin because it was different than the others. Yeah,
exactly.
It's really interesting.
The sperm whales took the high road and did it differently.
That's really neat how that works. I guess humans can learn a lot from that kind of behavior.
Absolutely.
What kinds of things do you hope that your readers, that your audience will pick up from some of these stories? Or I guess, what have you learned?
I think one thing is just to appreciate animals as kind of individuals, not necessarily all about instinct. I mean, there's a lot of instinct, especially in a wild circumstance, but these animals are choosing to befriend or, you know, to share time and space with an animal they wouldn't normally encounter. And they're crossing species lines. And, you know, especially for kids, I think the message that being kind to those who are different from you, not being afraid of those differences, is really important. Being gentle, you know, for politicians, I think there's a really good message here too, to kind of deal with things in a different way maybe than their first tendency is. And I think just to, again, appreciate the beauty and gentleness and kindness that can exist in animals. They're not all, you know, something to be afraid of. Wild animals have the instinct to be, you know, to feed and to do what they do in nature, but they also have the capacity for some of the emotions that humans have. And the more I've learned about, you know, what scientists are learning about animal emotion, the more I think there is much more overlap than we ever thought before.
Mm-hmm. And I would imagine there's benefits that humans don't even really think about when it comes to, you know, relationships with animals and our pets. I mean, for me, I know that I benefit from my relationship with my dog. I feel like, you know, I've learned a lot from my dog. I've learned about unconditional love. You know, I can ignore my dog, or, you know, say mean things to my dog in the morning, or, you know, be impatient with my dog, you know. But the next time he sees me, he's so excited he could jump out of his skin. Right. Yeah, he just loves me so much, no matter what. You know?
Only our spouses reacted this
way.
Right.
I know, if we treated each other this way, can you imagine if we just could forgive each other like that?
Yeah.
You know?
And I do think relationships with animals, you know, they have shown that it can help blood pressure, it can ease depression. You know, having access to animals for older folks in, you know, like home facilities and things can be really beneficial to their health. So I think in a lot of different ways, our own interactions with animals can be really, really helpful to us.
And I imagine teaching our kids the responsibility of learning to take care of a pet is probably a good thing too.
Absolutely.
When they get old enough.
Yeah.
But I know I've noticed with our latest dog, my kids are 10 and 12 now. I told them, you know, that if we were going to get this dog, that they were going to really have to step up. And I have been shocked at the amount of responsibility that they have picked up with this dog. My 12-year-old said this morning, I said, "Did you already feed the dog?" And he said, "Yes, it's a habit now."
That's amazing, because it doesn't always go that way.
It doesn't.
The mom says, and the dog, of course, became my dog, and now I do everything for the dog. Well, so that's great.
That's how it was before. So this time around, we said, you know, it's going to have to be different. And we all kind of agreed as a family that this is how it was going to have to be. And it's been a lot less stressful for Mom this time. But and it's been a lot more enjoyable for everybody. And I have to say, my kids have really stepped up and learned a lot about taking care of this little life. You know, it's really neat.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you coming out. And it's nice that you're one of our neighbors.
Yes,
you live in Silver Spring.
Thank you so much. And I should mention that there's a third book coming out this fall, and it'll be a little bit different, but kind of you know, similar in terms of cute pictures and fun stories, but it has a little bit of a different theme. So keep an eye out for that. Maybe we can talk about it sometime.
Yes, absolutely. Do you have a website or anything that you'd like to tell us about, or a good way to keep in touch with you, or to check in to find out when the book is ready?
My website is, my company is called Cuttlefish Pros. I have a thing for cephalopods, octopus and cuttlefish, kind of strange, but it's cuttlefishpros.com is the website. That's Uttle. Fish, and I post articles that I've written there, and you know, events that I'm going to be participating in, that sort of thing there. So
great, good. We'll be looking for you in the next in one of the next magazines too for Nat Geo, right?
Yes. Thank you.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome.